Got it.
Okay. Like try to be like an associate and other ways I can help with SIG Release. Hey folks, my name is Ray. I've been with SIG Release since 119. I was release lead for 123. Also as a SIG Docs co-chair as well. Right now I'm also just helping out with one of the POCs we're doing with SIG Release and packages.
Hey, I'm Jeremy Rickard. I was the 120 release lead. I'm the 126 branch manager. Did the releases this time around. I'll pass it on to Marcos.
Hey, my name is Alonso, and I am one of the tech leads with SIG Release as well for the release engineering project. And I work at China. And
my name is Carlos. I also am a tech lead here at SIG Release. I don't even when I started working on the releases, I think 14, 15, I don't know. And I work at Take Partners.
I'm Josh Farrell with Amazon. I've not been involved with SIG Release prior to this, but looking to get some information about how we can more tightly couple our version release with upstream.
I'm Sam Riesemeister. I'm also with Amazon, and Josh and I work together. So I'm also working on figuring out how we can match our release schedules. That's the main interest here.
Hey, hi, I'm Arnold. I'm the CTO of SIG Gating from also Release Manager Associate. So I have the team to get batch releases monthly. And I also have been involved in the project for a long time now. So welcome to everyone. I'm trying to basically project my screen so we can share the documents in the project also. Sorry about all this noise here.
Okay. My name is Carlos Santana. Started in SIG Release in 124 and 125 of release notes. I'm with Amazon. I just joined AWS, and one of the things that I want to do is like bring more AWS people into the SIGs, and SIG Release I think is like a cool place to start.
Hello, my name is Grace. I'm currently release lead shadow for 1.26. Has been involved mostly with enhancements since 1.22. Currently an intern at Asana, also at a school in Waterloo.
Jason, do you want to say hi?
Sure.
Hey, I'm Jason Gutierrez. I work at Cisco in the open source program office. I'm transitioning from roles in like SIG cluster lifecycle more towards helping out the project in a more core way through SIG Contrib-X and also SIG Release.
I'm Tim Pepper. I am an emeritus chair of SIG Release.
Who's that? Sasha is there. Good. Thank you. All right, so I forgot to mention that you can also add yourself to the list of attendees if you want to, and that we need a note taker for today. Do we have any volunteer taking notes? I'm just looking inside there.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so topic for the agenda. Jeremy, do you have any update on that?
Yeah. So it turned out to be exceedingly difficult to get a reservation anywhere for more than like 5 people. So we're gonna have to, I think, wing it. There's a lot of things happening tomorrow, so it might be a little touch and go. There are a few places that have some outdoor options if that's what people are leaning towards. Otherwise, we can go to like the alleyway called the Belt. It has a few places. It was close to where the it is where the contributor thing was yesterday, but it's an alley outside. There's a brewery with kind of like picnic table seating called Batch Brewing. It's fairly close. That would work. They have food trucks, things like that. A little further out, Detroit Shipping Company has kind of similar things. Those both, and one's about a mile, the other one's a little further. Probably would require lift rides for people, but we can try to coordinate that if people want to share lifts. So if anybody has strong preferences or other ideas, happy to hear them. We can kind of ad hoc over Slack kind of coordinate things. Yes, that's the major update for that one. Anybody have anything they want to suggest or add to that? I don't know.
So I'm just.
Oh, okay.
Mindful over if anyone needs to talk.
Okay. I'll add a couple places into the SIG Release Slack channel, and we can discuss in a thread there. I'll start it right now. All right, thanks.
Cool, thank you. So I would assume that we still start at 6 p.m.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. So the next topic is our SIG Release talk tomorrow at 11 a.m. in room 142 ABC. So everyone is welcome to join. We will be all four on stage. And I was planning to get Steve on stage as well, but I really hope that he will be around tomorrow at that time. Sorry?
Who are the speakers?
I did not get it.
Who are the speakers?
Who are the speakers?
Who are the speakers?
Who are the speakers for tomorrow? So, okay, that's gonna be Adolfo Carlos session. And Jeremy.
Jeremy.
Nice.
Yeah, that's a limit. Right. Okay, cool. So the next topic is the state of the binary artifact signing enhancement. So we have this cap as part of this release cycle and would like to graduate it from alpha to beta. And that means that we try to implement binary artifact signing onto our already existing container signing. And yeah. We can also open the cap. Probably. Yeah, so with this enhancement, we started to think about how we can sign our general artifacts in Kubernetes, and we started with the container image signing. Yeah, and this issue kind of outlines it nicely. So we can just go to the top of this. Someone on the top here. Yes. So for alpha, we were adding or just creating the cap, and we thought about adding container image signing as a first step, and we implemented it as part of our currently existing release pipeline, which means that we sign our container images directly when pushing them to the container registry. And as part, I mean, it wasn't directly part of this cap, but we also have the container signing implementation as part of kpromo, which runs on image promotion. Did I forget anything? I don't think so. So for the beta graduation, we are now thinking about completing this signing effort by also adding binary artifacts. And we will not implement it as part of our Creel stage or release pipeline. You can hear more about that tomorrow, how it works in detail. But the main goal is now that we implement a new step and move the signing logic into a dedicated Google Cloud job to isolate the functionality and to make it more secure. And I think Adolfo can also provide us a good overview about how it will look like. We did not do anything for the implementation yet, but I think we should start sooner than later. I will just.
All right, yeah, so we were discussing a couple of ways on how to sign the artifacts and how to sign the binaries. And there are a few nuances that we needed to change. So there are a couple of things that we are not doing properly just now in designing. So for example, when we sign the container images, we are signing them inside of the release process, which is, well, this is not the final signature that we add to the public images. This is, when we publish the Kubernetes images, they go out with two signatures, one as part of the release process, like a stamp from SIG Release, and then once we promote them for final public consumption, they get a second signature from the image promoter, which is supposed to be the community and organization signature that all images in Kubernetes receive. So the first one is the one that we are doing inside of the release process. And so the problem with that one is that if you think about it, the build process itself that we execute to compile Kubernetes, build images, and all that is really arbitrary code that we're pulling from the repository. So anybody that can sneak a commit can potentially get access to the signing key of SIG Release. So the plan now is to move. There was an issue with some cheesy diagrams that I opened somewhere, and explaining this a little bit more detail. And the idea is we are going to move that to some dedicated, as Sasha said, own step in the pipeline. And so that's one. And then we're doing the same thing with the provenance attestations that we're building. We're building those inside of the release process, and we want to move the provenance outside. So the tooling for to sign and create the provenance metadata is already done. I now just imported the repository of the new tool, and oh yeah, this is the one. So so we it literally happened like last week, right? We finalized the move of the repository to the Kubernetes organization. So now that we have it there, we can start using the new attester to generate the provenance of the builds. And the other part that is still missing to complete is adding the signing of files to Creel. Well, the files and also of the images, the new image subcommand, the new Creel sign subcommand that we want to build to sign everything outside of the build process. So well, that is the kind of the way that we want to do it. Just do it externally from Creel. So there are a few people assigned to some of the issues in the signing tasks. So I think this is a good time to maybe resync and see who's interested in working on what, and maybe just checking back on availability to see if months back when someone assigned an issue to themselves, maybe it's time to maybe resync and say, okay, I can or I cannot work on this, because we need to really press on this issue, because we're about to get there. So I think it's the proper time. Just one last note. One of the missing tasks in the signing kit is signing the S1s, and that is a little bit tricky because it impacts. So when if the idea is we want to rework the way we are generating the S1s, structuring them, So for example, I would like to see linear SBOMs attached to the images themselves. But in order to do that, we need to attach the SBOMs to the images when we build them and also promote them. But that will have a direct impact in the image promotion process. So currently, as we'll see in the next steps, in the next topics, the image promoter needs some help when it's to fix a couple of things there. And so I have the SBOM code in my branch in my computer back home. But I'm including on that because it's if we merge it now, it's gonna just make image promotion more slow. So yeah, that's basically the state of things. So, it's out you.
No, good.
Hi, so the question is, what will the user experience be for somebody on Debian or Ubuntu when they want to install kubelet or kubectl deb, especially with respect to the signature?
Okay, that's the next topic. Well, I think it was on the agenda, the pipe test, or I don't remember. So
We should add it. That's another good topic.
yeah,
It was not added. We didn't add that.
Yeah, I'll add it.
okay. So maybe that is like a whole nother discussion, and it's also really a present one because we are about to lose a lot of support from the people that currently sign the artifact. So we need to get that rolling. But before we change into that,
Do we have a list of existing issues that we want to review for the signing piece? I mean, you mentioned we should look and see the things that are assigned right now. Make sure the people that are assigned are still going to work on those or figure that out. Do we want to bring that up right now and kind of walk through the list of things?
yeah, so there are two places. One is one of them are related in the CAP itself, and then I open another umbrella also about like smaller topics.
2586 is the umbrella. 2586, the first link in the topics. Can you go to the meeting doc? First link, umbrella tracker. I just added it.
Right there, yeah.
These are the subtasks.
Right. That one. Yeah, there was another one. Well, yeah, maybe we need to do a better job of keeping them together because they're scattered in some places. But so basically, what we need is. So can someone comment on the state of the signing library? I think who worked on the file signing, Sasha? Do you want to talk about it?
So I started off with the initial piece on file signing, but then I guess after that, the person who worked on like adding tests for file signing modified file signing a lot because when we sign files, we essentially get a binary signature instead of for images because the signature is like uploaded to the OCA registry by cosign itself, and there has been like some API changes on that. I think as a library piece that is ready to be used, what we need to decide on is, so the first issue which is remaining 2618, we have to decide like when we run the new step till sign, what exactly are we going to do in there? I had a discussion with it also in August about like we had a chat like, okay, how do we do things? Because promotion happens twice or building happens twice. And like, when do you sign? What do you sign? Is something like we should determine and probably write it in the issue itself or the kept and then start working on the implementation. So before we like deep dive into implementation, maybe we should, or maybe we can like spend a few minutes on what exactly do we sign. And one of the ideas that came up was maybe we can go through the SBOM itself, if it is there, or the provenance artifacts, list through them, and then see what we generate to the end users, and then sign each of them, and then show the signatures at that place itself. The other way would be like, given a build version marker, iterate through the GCS bucket, look at the files which are published to the end users and sign them in place and store the signatures there itself. So these were the two ideas. And I was supposed to work on it, but then I got busy with like some internal stuff as well. So could not like get much traction on this in the last month, which is like September. Yeah, so Carlos is.
Well, I can, like,
I think Carlos.
Like, I figured out the issue. I'm still working on that. Like, I have some initial problems with my laptop. I was planning to finish before I could come, but I was not able. But I'm gonna be next week. It will be ready for all the things.
yeah, so there was some initial discussion on whether we should or not build the signing code into Krell. And the determination, such verification, if I'm wrong, is that we need to implement it ourselves, because what it will do is basically take everything that we staged, pull it down to a bucket, sign everything, and resync the bucket back up. So that's why we need it, and that's why we couldn't do it like sign. So, and we have no control over some pieces of that process.
So technically speaking, this is really interesting because the file signing will look completely different than the container image signing, because we don't have something like an artifact promotion for binary artifacts yet. And this makes it special because our use case for signing files and container images in cosign is also kind of special. So we don't have, cosign does not have any consumers who really take a huge list of images and a huge list of binaries and then sign them in one rush. This is what we will do. And cosign is not built for that performance-wise. And that's the biggest thing we have to deal with. Because if we now also, now we don't sign in K-Promo, it's fine. But at some later point, we also want to have something like a binary artifact promotion in place. And this would mean that we also will do it with K-Promo by creating pull request, marking which files and images we want to sign, and then we merge the pull request, and then post-submit shop will come over to the class. And I think that's it to this topic. So we still have to consider that I was evaluating into that direction in the past weeks, that we probably can change how cosign works and make it work for more parallel use cases. And this would imply, for example, reusing connections and tokens and caching things that would make it faster. But we are not there yet.
Yeah, we actually hit some issues in cosign. So we've been having two issues with the way we interact with Sigster. So the first one was an issue in cosign itself, where cosign initializes a top cache of the root keys, and then it had a rate condition where it would lock up by threads trying to write to the same file. So we upstream that change and then we fixed it. And now the one that we have is that we got hit by a rate limit recently. We have here a member of the GA team who can speak to that. So I think that's fixed right now. Yeah. So so that one's up. So yeah, but that's the state. So so you assign the initial file signing terms to yourself. Okay. So the ball is now there. So we can work on that. So are there any other questions about this part? Because otherwise, maybe it's a good segue to switch to the package.
Can we mention that we will split it up, the issue, because Marco is also interested in working on it?
On the files?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, let's rework it and see. Okay. So yeah, it's just to set up on the record, we were going to split the issue into more tasks. All right, so should we segue to the package? Anybody, Jason, would you like to talk about that, or who's unfamiliar with that one?
Yeah, that's the part.
Yeah, so we were looking at how can we do the Debian and RPM packages, because unlike the binaries and the container images, we can't leverage something like cosign to just sign those packages and they would work on, the various distributions that consume them. Right now, the only option is to use long-lived GPG keys that are stored on the host and live for the life of the repository. So right now, that process is controlled by a team inside of Google that basically they download binaries to their system, run a script, get the packages, sign packages, and then upload them to an internal Google controlled location. So we had a couple of alternatives to look at on how do we replicate this. We could have built parallel infrastructure similar to what Google has, try to get the signing process running in Cloud Run, but we already are stretched thin on trying to maintain infrastructure in the project anyway. So we decided to look at variable third-party systems that would be able to potentially host those. And the POC was specifically around looking at SUSE's open build service. And there are a couple of benefits to that. One is we never interact with the actual GPG key that signs the repository or the packages. It's controlled by the OBS system. And we would just simply leverage the API to kick off builds and what we need. And they would also do the hosting for the packages as well. And we had some discussions because we don't build devs and RPMs in the normal way. Normally, when you're building devs and RPMs, you're building it from the source. So the file storage is not a real big deal. You're talking about just text files, and then the binary artifacts are stored at the end, but they're highly compressed. For us, it's different because we pre-build the binary images and we want to use the binary images that are built through the release process. So we talked with the team about even if it wouldn't be feasible to start. Because if we were going to try to throw a whole bunch of data at them and they weren't going to be able or willing to host that data, then there was no need to proceed. Thankfully, the SUSE folks have been very generous with their time. We've met with them a few times now, and they help talk us through the process, ways that we can try to integrate, that sort of thing. The other nice thing about OBS is if we decided we wanted to self-host it later, we could basically run OBS in our own infrastructure and go that route as well. Either the storage requirements are too high on the SUSE side and we're being annoying to them and they want us to get out, or we wanted community-owned infrastructure again for that. So Marco has done an incredible job of actually trying to POC this out. And I see that there's a link in the channel that has to the comment on how to kick the tires on, basically the initial POC version of this. If things look good to start with, then we can continue iterating on the POC. If we hit any blockers, then we always have the option of standing up infrastructure similar to Google's and automating that via Cloud Run. But then we also have to do GPG key management for a community run group that people cycle in and cycle out of. And it's not like you could just replace the GPG key, because that requires users to make changes on their end. So that's one of the hopes that we're having is that this POC goes well. we'll only need to do a single migration. Users will have to accept it that first time. And then we can put a proxy or some type of a redirector up on our infrastructure so that it'll point to the OBS packages behind. That way, if we need to move to self-hosted OBS architecture, or we want to go full self-hosted custom architecture, we'll have that option in the future without disrupting users. And correct me if I'm wrong, Ray, I think we have the option. We'd have the option for migrating to our own infrastructure to actually take the signing keys that are being used in the public OBS now and install those on our system so that we wouldn't have to require users to change that if we made that approach. So it's a bit of a roundabout way, and we don't know how this is going to look yet, and that's why there's not a full cap designed around this specific migration process other than the high level cap, is because we want to try it out. If we hit issues, we can make changes, and then once we're happy with the state of the POC, we can then encode the path forward in the cap, whether it's continue with OBS, hosted, our own OBS, or custom architecture.
Okay, anybody has any questions about that? I'm a little bit concerned about the state of that one. So from what I've been hearing from Google, we need to make this happen like now.
Yeah.
So
I chatted with Ben, and he, I think, expressed a lot of concern that we should do this. We need to make a migration ASAP, whether that's we build the packages and Google still signs them for a little while, but we host and basically run Rapture or whatever that looks like in the interim. But he expressed that it seems like really should be a really big priority for us to move as quickly as possible to eliminate that dependency with it. So maybe that's we move to running that process ourselves. I think there's a lot of questions and a lot of possible depth to doing that process, but we should really maybe get a firm commitment from Google on whether we need to have this done before the next release, or if we need to do this sometime next year. Sasha first, and then Jason.
Yeah, so the enhancement itself exists since some years now, and it wasn't urgent but important because it's one of the main points of our roadmap. So I would prefer personally if we just continue on our current path and we have more time to do the migration, and rather than just changing our process twice.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on top of that, we got to think about the impact to users here as well. So even if we were to have the POC in a state that we could migrate to and start publishing, there would probably be a few releases before we could stop publishing to the Google infrastructure, because it is a URL change, it is a GPG key change, and that's going to take some time to get a good rollout with the messaging that we need so that, you know, users aren't kind of caught off edge on it. The other thing is when I say users here, I'm not just talking about users who are reading the documentation and going step by step. This would also affect things like Cluster API and the image builder that they use to build images there, and other types of Kubernetes installers that are consuming the devs and RPMs today as well.
Might be a silly question, but could we potentially run both paths in parallel and have kind of the official community release, and then it's kind of like side area with a different GPG key, and just have both the channels running, and at some point we could make that switch? Or potentially like in an emergency situation, it's like, oh crap, we don't have Google support anymore. We could then say, okay, here's the URL, here's the keys, here's what you need to do.
This kind of covering both bases. Is there any issues running both streams parallel?
I don't think this one because it's just two different repositories. Yeah. So, okay, so well, discussing this a little bit more in depth with Ben yesterday, one thing that could buy us some time is exactly then Sasha who mentioned it, that I think you, Jeremy, just if we start building the RPMs ourselves, then it's less of a burden of time to the people who will helping us. So the alignment has to be taking off as much time from them as we can so that they can schedule it more easily and also don't affect their performance reviews and everything. Because now people that help us are going to be basically volunteering their own time. It's not company time, it's going to be on their own time. So we could move it, like move the field inside Grail when we do the release, get the RPMs ready, just for them to download, sign, and upload to Capture. So that's the only thing I think that would give us some time to plan the rollout, do some better testing, and plan for the eventual deprecation of the current repository. So if I don't know if anyone has other suggestions or ideas, maybe now it's the time because we need to start moving on that.
Tim has his hand up.
Oh.
This is maybe gonna sound like a crazy question, but what would be the consequences of deprecating signatures in the RPMs of devs?
Great. That's what I thought anyone was trying to that's the problem. Because let us reach users. I'm sorry. So currently, all those system packages are signed by Google. So in order to move from Google, we will need to issue a new GPG, regardless of how we do that, OBS or us, but we need to basically generate new GPG and say to the community, because we move to the community, to a community infrastructure, they need to re-import the keys. So I think the unique option right now is trying to make the communication plan really early and say we're going to introduce a new change from a security perspective and generate a new key, keep that in the KMS system, Google, OBS, whatever, and provide that to people, basically upgrading the cluster and the environment. The package are the same because it's the same specification. The real issue is really signature because the system need to verify those packages. So we basically need to tell to the user / the community, we have a new GPG, please download it and import that in the system. Now, from a platform engineering perspective, how you make that simple in the upgrade process, and there's an impact. Also in downstream, I would say downstream distribution, we have companies and also sub-project using the skill. I would say cluster lifecycle, for example, use system packages with image builder. So we also need to make sure it's not breaking their user and customers.
So I think, Tim, if I'm correct, you were asking, why do we just not sign the system packages at all? And I think there's a couple aspects of that. One, there are no assurances at that point that when somebody installs a package on their system that it came from the Kubernetes community. That's one aspect of it. And I think the other aspect of it is optics. We used to provide signed packages, now we don't. Why not? And it could potentially have an impact on us as a community and how production ready we are with what we're producing.
So kind of the reason I ask is, and it's going to pick apart what you said there, is Right now, we don't provide that assurance. Google does. So what people are verifying is that they received binary signed by Google. That is different than from the project. And then if companies downstream are depending on that assurance, that's more of a business relationship with Google. So I think as a community, we need to think about what we deliver to our community users. And we're kind of dancing around that, I feel like. This would be a breakthrough change, but perhaps from a community perspective, so if it's mini cubes or Foster cube spray or frustrated cat, those are points where we could say, hey, we need you to, we're really kind of one of two changes, right? You're either going to need to change your code with the new key or to stop verifying. I actually kind of like the optics of stop verifying for the community archives. It would be better if we eventually got to a verifiable stream. I prefer to get there. But in the short term, we need people to understand that we're an open source project and what assurances we're actually able to provide. And I think we're trying to behave too much like an enterprise company. That's making it a lot harder.
So I don't disagree. However, I think we need to take into account the state of the world right now, and that not everybody has free access to the internet. They're going through proxies and things like that. And by publishing the GPG keys and signing it, they can verify that it's not intercepted in flight and they're not getting something else. I wish I could say that wasn't the state of the world right now, but I do think that's something we need to take into consideration, especially as we're talking about businesses that are deploying this, in production environments. As much as we say, don't use necessarily what we publish in production environments, you should take precautions on your own. There are still people that are doing it today.
One thing, totally agree, but if we start thinking about that threat model, then we can't go down the path of rebuilding the arguments that does for Google. Like the work would still be on them because that's another interception point.
Yep.
We can't.
How are they going to download it and trust that it's what you actually built?
Oh,
and accept it?
We could provide some assurance for that.
I think we already spoke about this also during the evaluation that it would be possible to not sign via by using the package manager, but sign by using cosign and just treat the devs and OPMs as binary objects. So yeah, but we right now have the support for the devs and OPM sign, and dropping that would be, from my experience with the community and also users, it would be problematic from my point of view. And would be what was my point? We could also, we were thinking about adding support to package managers for cosign. That would be really great. But I'm not sure if that's anyone who wants to contribute that change. On the other hand, I'm kind of doubtful about that companies are using the upstream packages for their products in production. I'm not sure who really does it, because every company I saw builds the packages on their own for reasons of cost. Yeah.
So I would argue against that, just because my experience at Heptio and a lot of the clients that we were working with before they came to us, they were absolutely using the upstream artifacts directly in production. And also, while I was at Packet, now Electronex Metal, all of our customers were deploying the upstream vanilla Kubernetes artifacts in their environments.
Okay. The SIG Intra, you heard about the cost problem. Most of the cost is coming from people downloading binaries and images from us directly and not working with the cloud or the vendor to have separate repository. So I think I'm with Jason here trying to make sure that we continue it. But if you want to swing way to the right or the left, depending on where you are, then we should look at like policies across the board to say, hey, now Apache Software Foundation, the policy says source only releases, right? So they do not make any binaries that are put out by the projects are like, helper kind of things, and, don't assume that they're going to be there. Don't assume that you are going to constantly get updates. It might break, it might not be built properly. So no assurances at all. So if you want to do that as a community, then we have to probably extend this kind of a thing outside of SIG Release and make sure that we can tell everybody that this is where we are going. We can't do it piecemeal at this point. Thank you.
So I would like to push back a little bit on the idea of not signing. So we're working on the North Star vision documents, which is basically the aligns like the priorities we want to do with our artifacts of the code. And two of those is to make the project more easily consumable, and the other one is more secure. And so I feel not signing or not creating the artifacts, I think it's a little bit of a regression, but I understand the view of you're trusting Google, not trusting us, but the fact that you can verify it seems kind of pretty dull, yeah, in the sense of I'm a little bit more worried about so for example, if we take the build of the packages inside of our current release process, isn't that getting us like a big inroad into just handling this ourselves instead of shelling out to OBS? I don't know. It feels to me that once we have those built, we only would need a process to sign them and run the repository in our pocket somewhere. It would be done, but well, maybe I'm wrong. I used to run my own repositories in my company before, and maybe it was a more simplistic view and I'm missing something, but I feel that we're very close if we build things inside the not.
I agree. In abstract, I just think that the less we build, the more we're able to focus on particular high-value artifact types and the security of those. And for me, RPMs and devs versus containers, I would focus on containers. But it's tricky to figure out the right deprecation policy for something like that. That is a big change, but we always struggle on human resources. So keeping every potential type of artifact on every OS for every hardware architecture in multiple different forms, binaries, containers, RPMs, devs, that's just a lot of work. If we could trim off some portion of it, that would also lead to cost savings.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think we could also revise the discussion about what we want to ship, because we started working on our list of supported platforms 3 years ago, and we really have to evaluate which architectures and platforms are necessary. I mean, we dropped them out of the make files and release process from time to time. They got deprecated, for example, some macOS architecture probably was not supported at all, and that was the point in time where we dropped it. So, for example, we could also think about or speak about, okay, we don't want to ship binaries for PowerPC anymore. It would also mean that we don't build packages and we save resources.
So one of the things I'll push back on here about removing support for the devs and RPMs, right now that's the easiest way for somebody to install Kubernetes on a supported operating system, because it's the only thing that takes into account dependencies and automatically installs it for them. Whereas if you install the binaries directly, you have to make sure that you have all the dependent packages in place as well. And installing Kubernetes is not something that a lot of people think is easy unless they're using some other type of tool to do it.
So one other thing I might touch on what Sasha was saying was, if you do something, you should do the same for all the artifacts. So let's not say you're a first class citizen, and so we are going to sign this, but not the other one. So we should try to do that. The other one is, if you don't get enough funding, we might have to go down this path, right? So that is another question mark. But for now, I would say people in this room should assume that we will get funding and we figure it out and continue on the path. But have this in the back of your mind just to see what we can do to reduce like the sizes, the number, the count, etc. And we should do the policies for it and then implement it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Let this serve as a question. I hear two options. I think of two options that I don't hear being discussed, and maybe we've rolled them out already. I just want to make that clear. One option is that we sort of outsource the build of the packages to like Debian and Ubuntu and the distributions. Is that an option we've ruled out? And then the other option, maybe also ruled out, is engaging other vendors. That say, currently we trust Google. We're talking about the community packages themselves being trusted, but maybe other vendors could produce the builds as well. Anyway, I just wanted to raise it as possibilities.
Yeah, so let me start with the first one, which was outsourcing it to the, sorry, quick feedback, was outsourcing it to the distribution vendors. And the problem there is a lot of the distribution vendors have really tight policies for each of the releases on what they can update. So they wouldn't do, a minor update within, say, using Fedora as an example. Once Fedora 37 is cut, whatever version they ship, they would only ship patch releases to that from there on without some type of another exception. So it would limit us in two ways there. One, there would only be one version available at any time, and you wouldn't be able to install an older version if you wanted to. And then also, you would have to deal with their policy that they would have to release Fedora 38 before you can release the next Kubernetes release and things like that. So that's a limiting factor there. Plus, they still want us to support like the specs and the sources and things like that anyway. And that was one of the things that was nice about OBS is you can build packages for all three of those in one system instead of having to, work with, because Fedora already has, Red Hat already has a system that allows you to build your own custom packages anyway. You can add them, and so Debian or Ubuntu has PPAs that would allow us Debian releases, but then we're interacting with multiple external systems to try to support that. Or having to coordinate with multiple vendors to kind of get these out as well, which adds to the burden of the release team as well. So I think multiple factors caused us to like rule that out from the very beginning. As far as vendors supporting this, in what sense? It's like building the packages and being responsible for building the packages, or hosting the infrastructure and that sort of thing.
And possibly both.
Do you want to speak to that one?
I mean, I think overall, we're trying to get to the point where things are community owned. We don't want to be in the same situation. Like, say we said, okay, Amazon's willing to do this for us today. In a year, is Amazon still willing to do that? Is Azure willing to do this? I mean, we build everything for Azure today. Like all the things that ship for AKS, we're building everything. And like, we could do that, but I think that it's incumbent on the project to really have more control over those things, so we don't have to go through this whole situation a year and a half or 2 years from now. Good. Like that. Oh, Dibs.
I wanted to say one last thing here. So usually we get benchmarked with, like, say, Docker. So let's go look at their experience and try to replicate the same thing. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, so do we want to come to some point of resolution to figure out what the immediate next steps are going to be? Or no?
I think we should. I think we should try to address one like major issue. That's the first one we need to address. How we basically shift the responsibility of building those packages from Google to us. I think that's the priority because it's been an issue raised for multiple time. Now, hosting and signature is a different conversation because we might need to try to figure out how we establish a policy to either sign those packages or not do it. And later we can talk about which system we want to use to build. Like maybe we want to also have a no opinion OBS instance running inside of infrastructure. I don't think there's a bigger issue to do that. But I think the priority right now is shift responsibility for building those packages to the community. That's
Okay, so it seems like the immediate need is to shift that responsibility. When do we think we would do that by? Like, is that something we would try to do for this release, or is that something we would try to do for 127?
Google would like to see that happen. Yeah, we would like to see that happening for this release. I don't know if I have to check because I don't have the scope of the project. I don't have an idea of how much we need to build, rebuild, or re-implement.
I think being realistic, I think 126 is probably too soon. I think we could probably target 127 for what I would consider an alpha release where we're publishing it in parallel, but the default is still the Google control packages. And then for 128, we can move to a beta state where we switch the default, but leave the Google packages available. And then probably 129 to completely remove the Google packages.
Okay, so that would be OBS. If we wanted to do, just take the Rapture scripts that they have today, is that something we would want to do for 126 and shift that responsibility now? I see a thumbs up and a head nod from Dims. Sasha shaking his head no.
The alpha should be we basically, we pushed it along down the line for a very long time now. I think we should try to do alpha this time.
I think it's worth it to try. The build and signing scripts are now separated. I mean, just a matter of time, maybe you can sit and do vetting of both the scripts. Ben is suggesting like, can we run the build scripts ourselves? They will still do the signing, but then it will reduce time on their end to ask for permissions because they just need to sign the packages that would be built and pushed to some bucket. We can decide on which bucket. Probably we don't have one right now specifically for this.
I have a question on that. Do you think that we would run that in the Google Cloud Build job, or is that something that the branch manager would do just like the Google people do today? They run it
on the CI.
Yeah,
on the CI. I think we have to make a decision, but it should be on CI or some clustered build cluster. It should be the build cluster.
Agree.
Yeah. So everything that we try to build that's new and should be all kinds of people on the.
I think we can scope the alpha release basically say we're ready to build. So Ben work on that in a decouple script. So we can build packages and we can have periodic doing that every day, publishing that which is maybe like create one 3 months ago, 4 months ago. So I think it's just a matter of days if you want to just try it and say, are we capable to build system packages and post that and push that to something owned by people. Now this signature is also a true conversation.
So I have a question. What are the reasons? Is it just about because personas should not handle the package building anymore, or is it about some technical? Has it some technical reason?
Well, I think the idea was to automate, grow the system and the packages. So I noticed that the cloud build job.
Yeah, no, I'm wondering what the reasons for the trial.
Basically, trump the need of the human to it. That's like the main reason of that. So we basically during the release process, after the signature of images, or after publishing that staging, we can add an extra step in the cloud picture to say, build the system packages, because everything is ready, and you push that with pieces.
Oh, helpful first.
Just a quick, and yeah, so remember that we also have the south cycle plans kit that we're working on, and that breaks. Putting breaks it completely.
Yeah. So, answer to Sasha's question, what Ben brought up about splitting part of the process is that on Google side, they need to ask for permission to their signing machines and the keys. If they ask for less time of access, like if they want to just sign, it takes much shorter time. And they are saying like, we can do the builds ourselves in the CI, but then let them only sign it. So it becomes easier for them to seek permission for the keys and the signing bits. So they have less time access and they can just revert back to us easily. Right now, according to my estimates, it takes 2 hours for them from the time we signal that the release is available to be published, and they're coming back to us and saying, like, hey, devs are published, go ahead with the announcement. If we do that, probably we can cut the time by a lot. I mean, the total time would remain same, but the back and forth time would be very small. So that is what Ben is suggesting, that so Googlers will not do a certain part of the process. We do it in our own CI, and then they can just handle the signing bits for us. So the humans are completely not eliminated right now, unless we have the POC.
Just to clarify that, would they also handle the publishing to the current location as well?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to.
Yes.
For now.
Yeah, for now. So that, that doesn't change at all. I think the mic.
So just to be clear, so the idea is to, because we separate those almost publishing system packages. So the first step would be to handle the build of the packages and publish that to an object storage services owned by the community and public. So now the Google Grid admin will need a less time to basically to publish it, and they might use that as a justification to security team to basically say, instead of like 12 hours, the token basically was just 4. And that's an element to negotiating. So yeah, that's like the first thing we want to do.
And so timing wise, it would be, you're at a point with the OBS POC that, and we discussed that with Marco in a recent meeting, that we build some permanent infrastructure, and then we would be at a point where we have to implement it into credit in any case, which is great. So we could also move that step to now and start outlining how it could work together with Drell, and just call the retrospect, for example, and then later on move that implementation out and change it with the OBS.
Yep.
Yeah. But we need someone who does this job.
Well, I just wanted to clarify too that OBS is strictly a POC right now until we can prove that it'll actually meet our needs. So I don't want to make it seem like we're being presumptive here. It's really a matter of we're kicking the tires, seeing if it would actually meet our needs. And if it does, then we can proceed with that, or the alternative of, building out the parallel infrastructure.
Yeah, and this would be possible also with other implementations, sorry, that just recycle the code for what's it called, BKG, for example, and it would look like the same in the end. I think the Rapture or the part of the Rapture script runs Docker, so we won't have any issues running it without it. Like assume that this works. It also pushes to the same locations as it does now, right? So you can then mention that you can run it on any developer machine, so it pushes into always to the same locations. So
for the publishing part right now is pushing to Google. So the location is a Google reference. I think this is the part we need to work on. That's how we can try to do that.
Yeah, that's the interesting part. Now it gets more detailed outline. So you still have to change more than just running a script now of CI, right? So it's more work than just calling a script.
There are multiple approaches, like, and this is more like how we establish the process about building. So ultimately, we can introduce a new variable to basically say, okay, the community is say, okay, publish to Google, no, I'm just going to use this. And we basically improve the process and say to Google, hey, change that variable in bash, and you can publish the environment. So there's like few things we can introduce quickly in bash to make sure we, because it's about introducing new location to the system environment. How we do that is just, I think it's a matter of tooling. We can do a fork of the script actually and just say, okay, push to GCS, because now those scripts are default. I think we can have an agreement with Google that we can say, okay, starting 1.7, we change the real script to push to GCS, and they don't care about how the system are built. They just say, okay, we want to publish them. They assume the package exists somewhere in the community. They don't know that sign.
So I not had a look at the script, but what I feel is, if the script builds the packages and like creates them in the environment that the script runs in, it's a matter of fact, like you can run the script in Krell release, and then like we do a GCS sync right now that we do anyway for our other bits. Like we do make quick release, and then just do a GCS rsync, right? Maybe we can do something like that. Again, something that just came on top of my head. But certainly, like I agree with your concern that we have to investigate the engineering efforts that are needed to make it work right now for both Google build admins, because release is near in almost like 1.5 months. Suppose this work doesn't go through, they still need to cut the release, and the patch release work also doesn't need to be hampered, because we'll have patch releases this month as well, and the script should also work that time. I mean, so I think we can take an action item that we can create an issue about investigation, see what we can do, create solid issues on them, and then just go ahead and make progress. This is how I feel like we can make it granular.
Okay, so we will create an issue to investigate, including this into the current release stage, release step of
Release
the, and investigate whether that's feasible for 126 or 127, kind of figure out what the engineering work looks like for that, and proceed from there in parallel to the package building POC. Oh, adopt.
Yeah, I mean, let's create an issue, but I would really suggest that everybody is interested in seeing how we can implement this. So take a look at the script, take a look at how it's serving build, and let's settle not for the week that we go back, because we're here.
Yeah.
So in 2 weeks from now, and we can turn it to go, and anybody who has ideas, what to work on it, and we can split up the work that day.
Exactly.
Session. And meanwhile, the POC keeps going, and we see if it fits, right?
Some channel. We can put it to the notes. Oh, this is like venture to decouple things.
Okay, any other comments regarding this topic? It's like everything has been said. Now the state of the promotion is the next topic. No?
I can talk for hours about that.
I think I'm a little proud.
don't run coward. Well, yeah, so as many of our release managers were here and elsewhere know, we are currently undergoing a change in the infrastructure. And so the TLDR on that is that we are now publishing the images when we promote, we are publishing them to 20, I think, artifact registry regions instead of the old ECR repositories that we used to. That will have really bad impact on the image promotion process. The process jumped from 30, 40 minutes or an hour to 6 hours. I don't know how much. Something unbearable for people managing. So there are lots of conversations going on what we should do. There are some ideas on the infra side. There are some ideas on the release engineering side. There are some optimizations that we can do upstream to SIG to make it happen today. So the problem is that whenever we do image promotion, we send a ton of requests to registries, and some of these are faster than others. And there's also the signing process, which means we need to upload information to the SIG transparency law, and that also has an impact. So when we started promoting to the new regions, the time it takes to do all of that multiplied. So there are some stuff I have been doing on some optimizations, and I would like to see less regions.
Yeah.
And there are some, I suspect, it's gut feeling mostly, that we have a bug that it's doing too many operations in one of the promotion stages. So, well, that's basically the state of it. So I don't know if anyone has any comments or concrete ideas that would like to bring to the table.
Yeah, I had an idea yesterday evening, probably going to bed. It is so. What we now do is we added some caching to the image verification and also to the signing. And this cache only lives for 1 hour, or something like this, like as long as the image promotion takes. And the idea is now, for example, digests and also signatures should not change. So we could serialize this cache into some structure and reuse it. But on the other hand, I think this makes it extremely unsecure, not per default, but it makes it extremely kind of easily attack adjacent block and change something, right? And then it gets reused forever, and which just doesn't make any sense at all. But in general, I think we can't really optimize, for example, how signing works, because we need a huge amount of connections to the registry. So we need to create artifacts, and for example, creating a blob, uploading a blob is something which, I mean, everyone knows that pushing images to registries just takes time. And if you do it for 1,000 images, then it takes 1,000 times this time. You can reuse connections, what we already do now. I created this issue for Go Container Registry, where I outlined that it's too slow for my taste, but I had no idea how to fix it. And then I got a code snippet where you can reuse the connection, and that's now part of the Release SDK. So we have to see if it really speeds things up. And if it does, then we can probably live with that. And we could also split up the jobs by sorting the images or something like this, and split up the jobs by image name. Anything like that, that we just promote per job 50 images or something like this. Yeah.
We've been doing that kind of manually. So when our release manager gets already, so it's a promotion in batches. So that yeah, do you want to talk about the regions?
Yes.
If you have anything to add.
Sorry, so basically when we start working on that, in the past we were using Google Registry. This service got deprecated, and then now have a new service called Artifact Registry. So in order to optimize cost, we create multiple artifact registry repositories in each region where we basically have proxy. because of that, we now have to do many API calls. We talk about 20 to 21 repository, 20 repository right now over the entire GCP structure. Because of that, the image promoter is doing many API calls. So every time you do promotion, the promoter will try to just copy to all these 20 repository. And that's why we see the time. Now there's like the possibility, yeah, like Mohammed said, we're eating quota on artifact registry, but it's superb because it's not visible in the console. But the logging from the promoter say we're eating quota. But when we go to the console, try to raise the quota request, there's like it's just not empty, but we are not reaching 90% of the quota. So it's more like a bug. I'm trying to basically raise that inside Google internally because it's like we don't have support to raise that as a product. So the mitigation about this is more like reduce the number of contributions when we go back to multi-regional repository. So one in US, one in Europe, one in Asia, like we did in the past. So basically reduce the number of endpoint where we want to publish. And that might bring us back to where we were in the past and trying to stabilize the system. It's just a matter of days. We do that. We have to do it at some point. Because I don't know if you want to do that post 126 release or before. We'll see what's happening. But that's like the first idea about mitigation. And in the meantime, try to improve the tooling to make that more faster. We're gonna absorb the cost, but it's worth it. Any question? I know there are people in the Zoom call, so if you have questions, please drop it in the chat. So, like any question in the chat? Oh, yes.
Let's see.
Okay, Marco is leaving. Okay, I was going to do research matter. Yes, it's matter because we have human attached to this process. So because of the condition, we might end up people sleeping at 3 a.m. So I think we need to avoid the timing is in essence. Also, we are tied to Google Grid admin at some point, so we should not take too long to do this process because also they are also part of business hours. So we have to make sure we capture this in one day.
There's also the technical side, which is we are starting. So there's also a technical side on that. So we're starting to see in the image from other logs rate limit errors because we're hitting the registers too much. Yeah. So we need to.
We changed the concurrency 10 to 100, so we can probably reduce it again.
No, I think it was before that.
So we did some adjustment about concurrency, and it didn't really have impact because Jane and Ben did a change this format basically. Version job and they were like no real impact. So we haven't brought the resources for because it's easy. It takes an entire node to now do the promotion. Like every day promotion is like a node with I think 8 CPU. I don't remember the of memory and take an entire node, but we don't see usage of those resources even if we tweak the number of trades used to do promotion. So they also how we basically redefine the routine we want to use to do promotion. We also need to see that in the future.
But so the thing with the resource usage is that the promoter is getting stuck mostly waiting for traffic, like talking to Caesar, that's what's spreading. So in theory, opening the concurrency may help the time because more the weight is now in parallel, but the problem is that we may see the rate limit.
Is like a question in the chat.
So, and well, the thing is, all of this happened some, all of this started happening the weeks before we came here, so we're starting to understand what's going on in there, and to try to come up with some solutions.
Anything else about this? I think because we're close to. Yeah, half an hour. I don't know if we have time for, but I think the rest is more like me and not a specific subject.
All right. So any other topics we would like to cover? Do we want to go through the current release team? Is there any update on the release of the release team itself? Would be an idea.
I just received some concerns from the tech authors about keep on affecting progress on CodePR. So they have asked me to ask y'all about extending code freeze.
Good question. Does anyone have any opinions on that?
Why? What's the why?
I think that they just are not able to make progress on keep on.
Okay.
So they want to delay code freeze.
So number.
I think we should be okay saying that we'll ship less this cycle.
Is not walking.
I think it is in terms of sustainability. I mean, people should not push really hard and break their sanity to release. And about code freeze extension, considering this release is short, I don't think we have time at all. Because after code freeze, we need to make the CI stable and release. I think we already have only like 3.5 weeks or around 3 weeks post code freeze, and it would get really difficult for talks, forms, the CI signal team to actually make reasonable progress and make sure that everything is working well. And I'm concerned about like the team as well as the community. They should not also push. The team should also not push hard, things hard at the end of the cycle.
Yeah, we kind of squashed the release to batch at the beginning of December this time to have more time for the release team, especially after the release. I would agree that we outlined the schedule before, so I'm now wondering, was there anything we could probably do better when considering it's about code freeze, right? Yeah, code freeze. I was answering freeze time, I think. But I don't see anything right now. Maybe I'm missing something. I would just say that we take action on this item, so someone can just create a mail for KDF about the outcome and what is our reasoning behind the decision making.
Well, I think because the question was not official written base. I think the request is not official. We should have an official request and see what's happening. And based on that, we can make a decision, because this is more like person to person. Okay. Doing like Chris. Yeah. Can we have an official request about extending code freeze? Like if you can talk to that person or trying to come and basically say, just open an issue or drop something on Slack.
Yeah, they can always file an exception request.
Yeah, they can try to. I think we need an official request to basically extend code freeze, and from that we can have the decision and have the conversation in next SIG Release Meeting about this. Yeah.
I think we do have precedents for this.
Yeah, we each year we have precedents for this. Yeah, but
Do we think people are actually surprised by keep on affecting velocity? Like, are there people that don't know this? Or like this? If that's the case, maybe we need to communicate that expectation. I feel like for most people working in the project, it should not be a surprise at all that keep on is affecting the velocity, and that you have a plan for that. And the
if it's not expected, then you should make sure that people expect it.
That's why we need to have like this conversation right somewhere.
Yeah, it has been my experience year after year that people do act surprised that people were not able to do many things at a time. And yeah, so I would have thought then in the past, but yeah, so you have to make them very explicit.
Maybe we can communicate something about that at the beginning of the process when we're reaching out to people about enhancements.
Yeah.
I think we have it in our release schedule.
Mhm.
In 1 week.
Yes, we do. So historically, the last release of the year has an extra week for QCon. But this year has been different with the 125, the 124 release was delayed. That also shortened 125 about a week and also 126 as well. But folks, the schedule has been outlined before 126. And it's been communicated out, but folks are always going to be surprised that whenever Clifties comes or whenever QCon week comes. But just remind folks, we used to do 4 release cycles a year, so and now we do 3. But there's people will still be surprised.
I think 1.26 is going to be one of those releases, like few years back when we used to do 4 releases per year. So that's why I told like I think we should be comfortable with less number of features in release. And even like people who consume Kubernetes, I guess like everyone wants less features in a way for them to make less changes. But that's not the point. The point is still like sustainability. But I guess like the action item here is like to have a formal request, like an email to the SIG Release mailing list, or somebody showing up in our meetings and asking like, hey, can we please have an extension? Although the exception process is there, not sure like of the tracked enhancements, how many would raise an exception because of Q4. But I feel like I don't think other than that we can take any APIs from the top. Anyone else?
Thanks. Good. So do we have any other topics we would like to discuss?
Blackboard and stuff.
Ben has one at the bottom.
Yeah, and then do something quickly. To be quick because we almost out of time. Starting 125, we knew the new registered endpoint. And this is in the KK report. And over, I think, 2 or 3 months now, we realize the main reason why we're doing this is to reduce costs. And it's not happening because basically no one created 125. So they raise the program levels. So a way to basically try to capture the traffic going to the new endpoint, we want to backport the change we introduced in KK to the different version, like 120 from 2024 to 23, because 123 is end of life, end of this week, I think, unless we got the last battery is from 122. So I don't know how we want to do this, but the idea is to backport that change to 124, 123. Trying to also talk to SIG about this and see where is the error due. The impact, also talk to SIG node and SIG personal life cycle. Hopefully this week and try to have solutions. But from a SIG release perspective, is be able to get that in the multi-batteries. This is an infrastructure. Basically, it's about changing an endpoint in the code base without introducing new code. So the real impact is as an infrastructure level, because we might have users/customers and distribution having specific network policy, or because they use cloud providers, they have all policy preventing two things. So the impact is more like at the infrastructure level. So we can try to have like a change log in batch release or have a explicit communication about this. And oh, this is this, those batch release introduce a change at the infrastructure level. Be careful and check your infrastructure policy before you work with it. Again, trying to do something like that. So I think that's like my first point. We can have all the conversation about this now before we move to the next.
So yeah, we were talking about this yesterday. I don't know, I've been giving it some thought and I don't feel quite comfortable backporting the change. So there are, so in my view, I mean, we had this conversation to have this already left. But one of the ideas was not bring it back because it's gonna break users. I mean, I would like to get like a full understanding of what were all of the points that we were changing. But I'm at some point I feel we kind of have to keep up with the promise of not backporting and breaking changes.
It's true, but you also have to consider, for example, that their container runtimes have this change, and there's a skew with kubelet now. So potentially, if they update like Containerd or Cryo, they have the same thing. Like at some point, users that want to use our images are going to have to permit this traffic. The thing that we have to consider as a project is if we don't get users using that as soon as possible, we're looking at reducing the spend on the GCP account until that happens, and users are very slow to upgrade. So the earliest release that we can make this a required change is when we start to actually pick up users. We see a lot of traffic for very old Kubernetes releases. And I don't, Arno, did you bring up the GCR redirect?
That was like the next thing.
Okay.
And so
an important aspect of this is I don't think we're gonna
wait, so any question about this, like backport in the Zoom chat? I don't know if like there's like any question in the Zoom chat. So,
Yeah, just one comment that there's no decision yet if we cut another 122 release, because we're just waiting for some external feedback.
well, I think it's really up to Sibyl to make that decision because we absolutely want 123, 124. Now 122 is like a different conversation. Or maybe in the future there's like going to be a security fix again, and we take the opportunity to do the backport. Like that's really up to. That's what we made it request. Like, do we want to cut a 122 release? That means we need to do that this week. Because 122 is out of life on Friday. So I mean, I don't want to push it, but I'm just asking right now. So in the chat, nothing, no, kind of like that's a question. So, for me, I would jump it off. No. Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah, so we need, so one thing is that I think we need to have the discussion continuous because it's just a products.
Okay. Also, I think in terms of like which images we use, the places we're actually talking about changing it are like Venom and Kubelet. So we really should be talking to cluster lifecycle and node, but release should be like aware and informed that this is potentially a thing in a future release because to affect the release. But in terms of like who has to approve this, I mean, we need to change the default in Venom and we need to change the default in Kubelet for pause. There's nowhere else relevant in the repo. Maybe the like base image that we're pulling from when you build. I'm a little bit less concerned about that because there's that much traffic from that. Yeah. So mostly I think cluster lifecycle and then node in that order. Yeah. And if they're comfortable with it, then I think that like at least can probably be okay with that. But we need to, like, they have to be comfortable with this. But I want SIG Release to know, so, like this is something we're looking at to affect keeping the registry well funded and everything else. Not getting any overhead space in that budget next year
means that we can't continue to move other infrastructure around or spin up new infrastructure on GCP. We have to, like, any new infrastructure is gonna have to be somewhere else for a while until we can get that actually happening. We have these Amazon resources, but we don't have users using them.
Okay, and so I think that's it. So the next point is more like Ben trying to.
Next point's related. So one long shot we had to try to fix this was to get the GCR team to redirect the existing registry to the new endpoint. We're getting a lot of pushback from users that don't understand that this is like Kubernetes versus Google. They just see GCR breaking them, and GCR teams, having a hard time with that. If it's it's a Google user, they have to revert, and they don't like. There's not even really an option. That's just standard operating procedure. You get a bug filed against you. There's an outage. You have to revert. So we're having a really tough time making progress with this. We tried to opt out Google traffic so we could keep it moving forward, and then we found that that wasn't sufficient for users. So I think we're going to have to quit with that approach. So that there's something like 25 times more traffic hitting the old registry than the current one, and it's because users are using older versions and aren't upgrading. So one thing that we realized is while we switch the endpoint in 125 as the default, in like most places in the project, we're still publishing to the GCR. So there are users that will continue to pull those images from GCR just because of the vendor. So what we'd like to do is do something similar to the vanity domain flip and move the config for the registries, a copy of it over to the registry.case.io directory in the case.io repo, and start promoting that separately. Stop promoting to GCR. So that only the existing tags are there, at least for 125 forward. So it's a different question for past releases. If we do backward to previous releases, then we can maybe stop doing it project-wide. If we don't do that, then we just start doing it for like about 125 forward, since we already changed the default. In doing that, we currently rely on pulling from the bucket behind GCR to copy to the S3 buckets. So we may, as the quickest solution, want to spin up a GCR that's used internally just for that process. So when we're promoting to AR, we promote to a single GCR in one region so that we can copy to the initial S3 region and come back later and implement a tool that reads from OCI to the bucket instead of from the bucket to the bucket. Any questions?
Yeah, so to me, that sounds like a more reasonable deprecation, but like if you do not move the registry, then you don't get any effects. Previous one, I'm kind of concerned of breakage. And also the question about patch releases is this, because are you going to just stop sending the updates on the usual channel? I think it's a little bit of discussion.
I mean, I think it's something you certainly have to have release notes, but I think one thing is, as opposed to like a V1 Kubernetes API, I think going forward, the project has to be a little bit less afraid to break people that are being extremely brutally dependent on the exact details of the image hosting. Like, we don't want to continue to advertise as an API exactly how to host it. In the future, we may want to use like resources from Microsoft or something, or a CDN provider. And the same users that would somehow be broken by this change are going to be broken by that change. And like we have to do something to keep things online. We're exceeding our $3 million a year run rate on GCP. And the other infrastructure, we don't even have like transparency into like what resources we have. So we could well exceed those. I think that at some point we have to break this pattern. So I don't know if we definitely do the patch releases, but I think we have to seriously consider it because it's one of the best opportunities we have to actually get the traffic shifting timely. If we continue to wait on shipping this, it could be years before we actually have significant usage on like 126. And in the meantime, even if we get resources from other providers, we're pretty stuck. Only room we have is for someone to start paying more for GCP. And I'm in conversations about this, but
it's hard to get Google to commit to even more resources here, especially on a short-term notice. And other providers, I mean, they don't want to pay somebody else's cost, right? They're going to give us resources on whatever they can provide themselves, but we can't get traffic onto that unless we get users onto an endpoint we control first. And in the future, we're going to make changes to that backend, probably without it being release note, because we just have to roll it out at some point. And users are just going to have to either mirror images themselves or accept that they may need to allow new endpoints there. I don't think we can overly cater to, I'm a user that filters traffic and wants to depend on the free registry. For the GCR team, it's a little bit different because it's a Google product that people don't understand the distinction. But I think as the open source project, since it's no one's company's brand here, I think we have to be able to say, like, you're depending on our enormous resources for the images. If you need to be very picky about the traffic you permit, then you're going to need to mirror. That's your problem.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to lay down that weird sensitivity, the urgency of this. I'm just looking for the less painful path for the users. That's it.
Yeah, I think that I think that like folks working on Kubernetes will probably have the best idea of like how much of the Jesus is there. I would also say that we should, even if we export this, we should probably make the distinction that we stop publishing tags for 125 for, because that's where it was everywhere default from the beginning. I think it's much easier to stop publishing tags for those, but we could still consider changing the default. So that also gives users a path to say, okay, this default growth, we'll just opt out of it and continue using the old registry. But we can push as many users as possible to smooth. For most users, this shouldn't be a breaking change. It's an OCI compliant registry. It's public read. It just works. It's only if you are filtering what traffic you permit your nodes to access.
Yeah. So, some of the conversations in Valencia, like, pointed out to some possible doomsday scenarios for some companies that are doing that. So, I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, I know that they are, but I also know these are large enterprise users that probably should, depending on like our infrastructure, and really should consider mirroring if their uptime is sensitive to our uptime. I mean, just as well, the registry could go down. We don't have a staff on-call for this. This is right now when there's an outage, it's like me or I know trying to fix something in the middle of the night, because also we don't want to give many people direct access to this endpoint, because until people are actually using our SIG store images, you have to trust the registry itself too. The OCI proxy implementation is, whatever's deployed there is very sensitive, and we're not going to have a starting rotation for that. So, if you're really sensitive to the exact details of image hosting and the uptime, you need to mirror.
Which action are we going to take on this?
I would love to see that we backport the default to the patch releases with a big glaring release note, that we continue to provide images on GCR for the older releases, so there's an escape hash. And for 125 forward, where we never advertise GCR, we stopped publishing tags. To be the hardest push was people at 125.
I don't want. I think that's a given, right? We can stop at 125.
I think it's on SIG release for 125 forward. SIG release should be aware, and we'll certainly do a big release note. But I think we have to go talk to cluster lifecycle and node folks if we're talking about a backport. I know that some node folks were already interested in a backport for pause because of the pending skew with the container runtimes. Anyhow, there are team on board pushing bullet, but I haven't talked to everyone. I don't know that yet, and I haven't had it. I don't think I know if I had a chance to talk to cluster lifecycle at all yet. I think we've only talked to Nadir on Kubernetes. We need to talk more Kubernetes folks. But if they can agree, then we'll come back to secrets and say, okay, they're on board. Expect that this needs to be well communicated in the release.
So it does seem like one of the first takeaways or action items down here is communication. Like regardless of what we do, there sounds like there's a storm are brewing, and it sounds like people are slow or laggards to upgrade. And I think we all know the reality we're in. And so what we can do is start with some of the communication while we're figuring out, are you backporting, are you not? But like blog posts, socials, like getting the message out there, filtering it up, kind of bubbling it up, getting the word out there. So it's more just awareness while we're figuring out how we're going to execute, because it sounds like we don't have really any time.
I actually want to add to the time urgency thing. So this is actually something that we were like pushing last year, or not me, but like, the project, and we didn't have progress. We knew we were over budget back then. I've been pushing on it since January, and we've made some progress, but because there's so much latency to it actually taking effect, what we're looking at right now is, I mean, the project is going to be out of GCP credits like beginning of November. I'm working with my employer to try to get some like emergency credits to make us through the end of the year, but I'm, the feeling I'm getting is they're not going to be inclined to keep doing that on a recurring basis. So next year's budget on the GCP resources may be tight if we can't start to actually take advantage of this. And this is by far the largest cost. Hosting these images is one of the few things that's on the community budget that's taking like over 2/3. And there's other discussions. We have a lot more, that like the binary downloads right now are actually built directly to Google on internal infrastructure. And now that we're having these conversations about emergency credits, I think more people aware just how much stuff is running on this other budget. It actually costs more than what's been donated to the community so far. Yeah, if we can get this traffic shifted, I think that's the most stable thing to do. I'm not super senior or anything, so this isn't like Google's position or anything. I'm just a person in the project that happens to work there, that cares about keeping this up. And from my point of view, like we have got to get the traffic costs more sustainable, spread around sooner. This is really unfortunate that we didn't get the endpoint change with a simple redirect much further back. And going forward, I think depending on who is providing how many resources to us that we take advantage, we are going to have to, start shifting traffic for downstream things. Out of all of our costs, letting end users download unlimited container images and binaries is massively adoption cost. It's millions and millions of dollars. Well, on the community budget, but there's also the binaries, which I think is an even greater portion of the remainder.
Do you have an idea how much